The lock clicked at 11:45 p.m., a sharp, invasive sound that tore through the silence of my living room. I didn't reach for the light. I sat in the armchair, the pages of my book still open, though the words had long since lost their meaning. When Mark appeared in the doorway, he didn't bring the warmth of a returning husband, he brought the biting chill of a man caught in his own lie. He looked exhausted, his tie undone, his posture slumping with a performative weight. He didn't drop his suitcase, he slammed it against the wall, the heavy thud vibrating through the floorboards. 2 weeks, Elena, he barked, his voice raw with that familiar, rehearsed indignation. 14 days of back-to-back meetings, and not a single check-in. Do I even exist to you anymore? I watched him. Usually, this performative rage would have sent me scrambling for excuses, desperate to soothe his ego. Tonight, however, the silence between us felt heavy, not with my guilt, but with the cold, hard clarity of what I already knew. He was pacing now, a predator looking for a reason to snap, his eyes darting toward me, searching for the crack in my armor. He wanted me to argue. He wanted me to be the villain so he wouldn't have to be the culprit. But I simply exhaled, the air leaving my lungs in one steady, calm stream. The game was over. I'm waiting, Elena, he snapped, throwing his hands up in a theatrical display of betrayal. Was I just a ghost to you while I was fighting for our future in Chicago? I didn't flinch. The book on my lap felt lighter now, a discarded relic of a life built on half-truths. I called, Mark, I said, my voice cutting through his theatrics like a blade. I called 3 times, just as you asked. He paused, his jaw tightening, clearly expecting an apology. And? The first time, a woman answered. She had a voice like honey and smoke, and she asked who was calling with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. I hung up. I thought it was a mistake, a fluke of the hotel switchboard. I stood up slowly, watching the color drain from his face, replaced by a frantic, sweating panic. The second time, I was more insistent. I told her who I was. There was a pause, so long I could hear the wind through the phone, and then she said, Mark is busy with our daughter right now. Stop calling. The air in the room turned stagnant. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, darted toward the hallway, as if looking for a way out. It's not what you think, he whispered, his voice losing its iron edge. The third time, I continued, I didn't say a word. I just listened. Not what I think. A bitter laugh escaped me, sounding foreign and sharp in the quiet room. Mark, you've been working in Chicago for 3 months out of the last year. You've been building a life, a home, while I was here, dutifully keeping the bed warm and the bills paid. He tried to step toward me, his hands reaching out, but I retreated toward the window. He looked pathetic now, the expensive suit wrinkled, the arrogance stripped away to reveal a man terrified of losing his dual empire. It's a complicated situation, Elena. It was an obligation that grew into something I couldn't walk away from. But you are my wife. This is my home. Your home? I repeated, my voice ice. I pointed toward the leather briefcase he had discarded earlier. Is that why you have a second phone in your bag? The one with the cracked screen. The one you leave on silent because the obligation might text. He froze. The realization that I had seen, and heard, too much shattered his last line of defense. He wasn't a man who had made a mistake. He was a man who had orchestrated a masterpiece of deceit, meticulously separating his lives like accounting ledgers. He hadn't been fighting for our future, he had been protecting his own comfort. The lie was so large, so hollow, that it finally collapsed under its own weight, leaving him standing there, exposed and utterly small. The silence that followed was heavy, a vacuum where his excuses had once been. He stood there, his shoulders slumped, waiting for the familiar storm, the screaming, the sobbing, the desperate pleas for him to fix what he had broken. He was a man accustomed to managing outcomes, and he was already calculating how to navigate my next move. But I gave him nothing. No tears. No rage. No dramatic ultimatum. I simply crossed the room and picked up his leather briefcase, the one that held his dual life. I held it out to him, my hand steady, my pulse quiet. "Take it," I said. My voice was devoid of the affection that had defined our 7 years. It was the flat, clinical tone one uses to dismiss a stranger. "Elena, don't do this. We can talk," he stammered, his eyes flickering with a frantic, unearned hope. He reached for the handle, but I pulled it back just an inch, making him step into my space. "You wanted me to call, Mark. You wanted me to notice you." I noticed everything. I opened the door, the hallway light spilling into our living room, bleaching out the shadows. "You wanted a separate life. Well, you have it. You're already halfway there." I didn't wait for his protest. I simply turned my back, walking toward the balcony. I was finally done with the performance. The front door clicked shut, a soft, definitive sound that signaled the end of a long, exhausting act. I didn't rush to bolt it. I simply stood in the center of the living room, listening to the fading echo of his footsteps down the hall. The apartment, once heavy with the suffocating weight of his secrets, suddenly felt vast and oddly quiet. It was the silence of a blank page, not the absence of a life. I walked to the kitchen and opened the window. The city lights of New York blurred into a tapestry of possibilities, cool and indifferent to the wreckage I had just swept away. I didn't feel broken. In fact, for the first time in years, I felt entirely present. I went to the pantry and began to clear out the remnants of his presence, the specific brand of coffee he insisted on, the redundant kitchen gadgets he claimed to need. Each item felt like a heavy stone I was finally putting down. I wasn't the woman who would spend nights waiting by the phone anymore, nor was I the one blinded by the brilliance of his curated world. I was just Nora, standing in my own home, breathing air that was finally my own. Tomorrow, the lawyers would handle the rest, but tonight belonged to the stillness. I picked up a book, not to distract myself, but to enjoy the quiet, and realized that the future was no longer something to fear, it was something to author.